the YWCA in general, nationally, this is the national YWCA that set that mission about 10 years ago, saying that the YWCA was about eliminating racism and empowering women, because they realized that racism is part of so many of the structures in our society that until we address that and dismantle it, there were a lot of other things that weren't going to get solved. And so that was sort of the genesis for developing this as the mission. Many of us don't have as much exposure to people whose lives are different than ours as it seems like we might. You know, Evanston is a very mixed community, racially, culturally, economically, but at the end of the day, you know, most of us live and work and play with people who are very similar to ourselves. And so as much as we like being in a diverse environment, we're not as connected to each other's stories as we could be. And so that's part of what makes it hard. Economics and race are so intertwined that oftentimes we mix the two up. People say, oh, well, it's all about race, and it's really, sometimes it's race and sometimes it's economics, and oftentimes those two are very similar issues, because oftentimes the people who've been able to get the jobs that afford them the big fancy houses are people whose skin is white. And now, of course, that's changing some, but that's changing slowly. And what we find out when we talk about what the experience is of a lot of people of color is they know that they know all of the rules of how to live in my world. The rules of how do you do things so that the white world will recognize and include you. And, you know, again, people who are white don't have to know the rules of the other world, because they can comfortably live in the world that is, you know, all of our systems and societies were created way, way back when by our founding fathers for white male property owners. You know, our country is based on a constitution that was written for white male property owners, period. Again and again, what we heard was, we don't know how to talk about this. We can't address this problem, which keeps coming up as if it's not always there. But when an issue would come up related to education or healthcare or whatever, if it seemed to have a racial aspect to it, that scares people. They don't know how to proceed for fear of saying the wrong thing or offending someone or not knowing something they should know. And so it would end up either paralyzing people or polarizing people. And so the YWCA, fortunately, even before I came along, they were working on a notion of community conversations and helping people develop the skills to have the conversations so they wouldn't be afraid. And as a society, we aren't great focused listeners. So I might be talking on the phone and listening to that person, but I'm also on the computer, or I'm unloading the dishwasher, or I'm sending an email to somebody doing whatever. And so I'm not fully listening. And our stories all of our stories deserve to be fully listened to. We always say we're on a journey, and nobody is an expert at this. And there are days when, for me to be tolerant would be such a leap forward, because we all have prejudices, not just white people. We all have some things that, you know, a type of person that we don't like, or a type of person we find difficult, and so we all have to keep moving on our journey. But the notion of, you know, some people think, well, integration means if I have a person of a different race over for dinner on Saturday night, I'm good. You know, you might never have a person who's a different color in your house, but if you don't ever have a conversation with a person who's a different color, it's really hard to move forward, I feel. Just being able to hear someone else's story from them, not on TV, not from your friend, let me hear your story from your voice, from your own experience. Even for 5 minutes, let me hear your story. That's going to change me.